About to record a show that I truly never thought I was going to record here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Talking about Lindy Ruff as the next Buffalo Sabres head coach.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sneaky Joe DiBiase. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I wasn't lying. At the open of the show, I did not think we'd ever be talking about this. Today's show, it's all about Lindy. Lindy Ruff is back. He is the Buffalo Sabres head coach again. It's surreal to even say those words. I was sitting here in this chair before hitting the record button thinking, this is so surreal. Am I really about to do this? Are we really about to talk about the merits and the emotion at stake? And I want to talk a little bit about the PR part of this. Are we really about to talk all this? Lindy's the coach? Like, that really happened? I got this text from Sabres Public Relations, which usually only comes out, like I found out about it maybe, 90 seconds before everybody else would have on social media. It's not much of a heads up, but there's the text right there from 5:10 p.m. The Buffalo Sabres have hired Lindy Ruff as the team's head coach. Actually, some of you might have been alerted to this before I was, because I was not on Twitter much today. And I guess Elliot Friedman was onto this before the team announced it, something along the lines of that there are things working right now between Lindy and the Sabres. Adam Benini, Channel 2, also had something. So if you were plugged in on Twitter all day, you might have seen something that would have alerted you to this. But for me, it was that text message. I still can't believe it. I'm looking at it right now. I still cannot believe I got this text message today at 5:10. Man, there is just so much to get to. Your thoughts as well are always welcome. If you, the quickest way to get a hold of us here on the show, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres. Sign up for our text service if you're not already a part of it. I sent the news out immediately to all our texters, so you might have found out about it through us. We had some good back and forth over the past couple of hours on that, on like, just, do you like this move? Do you not like this move? I don't really think they could have done anything that would have been more polarizing, that would get more fan engagement. So, hey, as someone that covers the team, I'll take the content. It's great. As a WGR host, I wish they could have spread it out a little bit more. We didn't necessarily need more content during draft week, but for the podcast, loving it. Great. I'm glad we talked Rod Brind'Amour, though, on Friday. We got that out of the way because obviously no more Brind'Amour talk. Full speed ahead. Lindy is their head coach. It is so crazy. And I think the overriding sentiment from fans will debate between now and the middle of October when they open the season. For the next 5 to 6 months, of course, we're going to have lots of debate about whether this was smart, whether this was good process, whether this is just in general a good idea for the type of team that you have. But there can be no disagreement amongst anybody that the fans are going to want this one to work more than anybody else. Lindy is that level of guy. He is that connected to the community. I saw a crazy stat. If you just aren't aware, maybe you're a younger Sabre fan, or maybe you're listening from somewhere else and are not aware of how ingrained Lindy is in Buffalo Sabres culture. He has been employed by the Sabres in every single decade that they have existed. He was drafted and played for them in the 70s, was the captain in the 80s, was the head coach in the 90s, no goal, right? Shouting at a rally in front of 1 million people downtown in front of City Hall, no goal. after Dallas unfairly won the cup on that goal by Brett Hull. He then coached for 15 more years. He is the coach all the way into the 2010s. That's the last Sabre playoff team. And now in the 2020s, he's back again as the head coach. 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. He's been around. He has a house here, right? Even in all his years since he got fired 12 years ago, whatever that is, 11 years ago, while he was the coach for Dallas, while he was the coach for New Jersey, while he was the assistant coach in New York, all that time, the guy's always had a house here. The guy's always called this place home. He said it on his exit press conference when he got fired 11 years ago, that this will always be home for him, that he's been a part of this franchise forever. The thing that's going to make Sabre fans feel good, it doesn't have to matter. It doesn't have to be whether they are good or bad, but there's no doubt that if there's anyone in the world that you think loves the Sabres and wants to see them succeed more than you do, if there's one person in the world that wants to see the Sabres succeed more than I do, I might think it's Lindy. Every time he talks about them, I almost was moved to tears at RJ's memorial service at the arena this last summer, where Lindy was there. Lindy was, he, of course, as I mentioned, he's got a house here. He was in town. So he went to the arena, got a standing ovation, by the way. How often does that happen? Where a former coach of yours that didn't win a championship got a standing ovation. And he was up there on the stage talking about Rick Jeanneret. And he was almost moved to tears. He almost moved everyone to tears, talking about how his biggest regret in his hockey life is that he didn't win a cup for RJ. That before RJ passed, he couldn't give him a cup. It's what he wanted to do more than anything. And you got to know he feels that way about every other Sabre fan. Again, none of this feeling and emotion has to matter. It doesn't have to be the reason why they make the playoffs or not. It doesn't have to be the reason why they win the cup or not. But one thing I will say, this fan base is just dead inside. It's been so long. I was in high school the last time this team was in the playoffs, and now I am married with a house. It's just whole different phases of life have happened since they've been in the playoffs last. And people feel lost and dead about the team. And Lindy is going to provide a spark. Opening night is going to be awesome. I don't know, maybe it would have anyway, but opening night's going to be awesome. When he gets introduced, opening night, the roof on the building is going to go off. There's going to be a sense of belief that they're going to figure it out this year just because of his presence behind the bench. So there's a lot of emotion involved. There is a ton of it. I can't wait for him to talk about it, even just for the off memories about the 06 team or 99 and Hasek, just anything, because the nostalgia is what plays right now for the Sabres. Nostalgia is the only thing that makes anybody feel good about the Sabres. And they just did the most nostalgic thing they possibly could have. Now, I'm here to tell you that I think the Sabres made this move not only in spite of the good feelings and the nostalgia. I might even think that could have been something that persuaded them not to do it, and that they are going to be willing to accept that because they truly believe Lindy is the right man for the job. I'm here to tell you why I believe he is the right man for the job, and I am going to try my very best to take all of the nostalgia out of it. Just let's look coldly at the resume, what he's done for you lately, because that's important, and the style, game management, player management. I think Lindy is going to be a good coach for this team. And I'll tell you why when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by FanDuel Sportsbook. Best time of year, right? You have got NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs. You've got the NFL draft. You have got golf, full speed. Scotty Scheffler winning every week. So, you can do with the odds with what you want there. But you got the middle of the golf season. Everything's happening. Playoff time, baseball in full swing too. Should have mentioned that. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports today. Locked On NFL mock draft, I should mention, is available now. You can find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise. That includes your Bills, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. Locked On NFL mock draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You're not dreaming. This is real life. Lindy Ruff is once again the Buffalo Sabres head coach. Your first reaction. I'd love to hear from listeners when you found out. I not only remember where I was when I found this news out, because I was not doing anything crazy. I was sitting on the couch and I was on TikTok, and boom, there's the text. Lindy Ruff is going to be the next Sabres head coach. I remember where I was when Lindy got fired back in 2013. I was at the Erie County Public Library in the parking lot, and the radio was on, and I heard Shope and the Bulldog. I heard Mike Shope say, "We are hearing who's got it." Not knowing what the news was, the Buffalo Sabres have fired Lindy Ruff. I remember where I was when that happened. I also remember where I was when he got hired again. Nothing crazy. Maybe you've got a cool story of where you were and would remember it. But Lindy is back. It is pretty crazy. I am here to tell you that this is not just about the feelings. This is not just about the emotion. I've seen some good takes all along the lines on this hire. One that I saw from a texter on our text line, again, if you're not signed up, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres. One that said, the game has passed Lindy Ruff by because he hasn't coached a 110-plus point team since, last season. Last season, he did this. There is a little bit of what did you do for me lately with Lindy Ruff. Now, there's a lot of context, though, that goes with that. My evaluation of what Lindy means as a hire kind of doesn't even need to mention the fact that he used to be in Buffalo. When Kevin Adams went to the podium last week, what he talked about was a coach who was going to hold players accountable, that had pedigree and knew how to win in the league. But pedigree was a word that he used over and over and over again. Take the name away from it. Pretend you don't know who the Sabres just hired. Pretend you don't know the resume. Let me put it as positively as I can for you. What if I told you that the Buffalo Sabres, for their next head coach, were going to hire the head coach who is 5th all-time in wins? Every person that's ever coached in NHL history, this dude has more wins than all but 4. 5th all-time in wins. And last season, he coached a team to 3rd place in the NHL with 112 points. Not just any team, the 2nd youngest team in the league. The only team older last year and this year than the Buffalo Sabres. What'd you say? He coached the 2nd youngest team in the league to 112 points, 3rd place in the league, won a round, 5th all-time in wins. What would you say? You would say, sign me up. That is if you didn't know that Lindy had all of these ties to the area, didn't have all of these connections. Now, this is why, for me, it's also not a perfect idea. There are some warning signs, but I think we are going way too far with these warning signs. I was wondering about this before, but now we've gone too far. The Andrew Burnett narrative. Where is this coming from? In the league, I guess people in the league are saying this, which, am I right to say this is just the Devils GM that is putting this stuff out there? Because that dude talked very bitterly about Lindy Ruff after he got fired, putting it all on Lindy, openly blasting Lindy Ruff, after he was fired. So what is it? Tom Fitzgerald is the Devils GM. I might want to think that all this Brunette nonsense started there. But if you don't know what the Brunette nonsense is, essentially there has been this sentiment out there in the media, and that's locally and nationally, Devils media especially, in recent months, that last year's success by the Devils was all Andrew Brunette, their assistant head coach, who then went to take the Nashville Predators job. That's out there. And I just think it's complete. When have you ever heard that about any coach ever? When have you seen the revisionist history get written as, oh no, actually the head coach wasn't the guy, it was the assistant coach? What? He's the head coach. He gets, okay, we're going to give him no credit for that team last year. Really? We're going to give him no credit for that team. All right, sure. I'm not saying Brunette didn't help and that Brunette isn't a good coach. He's done a very good job in Nashville this year. But to take all credit away from Lindy because of who his assistant coach was, to me, is blasphemous. Their goaltending is another key reason why I think this year looked very different than last year. You might say it was Brunette. I might tell you you're crazy if you think Brunette is more impactful than his starting goaltender getting injured and having AHL level goalie production. What is a guy supposed to do? I'd argue there's no coach in the league that would have got a playoff level result out of that Devils team this year. No, with that level of goaltending, nobody would have. Also, they had a lot of injuries elsewhere on the roster. I just think it's nuts. It's nonsense to think that that's the biggest reason. If you want to look at the other seasons and point to those and criticize Lindy, I'll listen to that, right? I'll listen to that. I'm more focused on how good the results were last year, but okay, you want to look at his last 5 seasons coached? Don't talk to me about Brunette. Talk to me about 6th place in his division with Dallas, 7th place with New Jersey, 7th place with New Jersey, 2nd place with New Jersey in the division, and then 7th place. So in his last 5 years, he's made the playoffs 1 time, and he's had 4 teams that were 4 of his worst results as a coach. That's what you should be pointing at, not Andrew Brunette was his assistant coach. I think that has gone way too far. I did not mind that being a point to be made about having some reservations about Lindy, but it's gone 100 times too far. And I'm thinking that Tom Fitzgerald, the Devils GM, had something to do with it based on how he talked about Lindy at the end of it. So that's where we're at. The youthful part of the team. Let me just get to that also. I mentioned that he coached the 2nd youngest team in the league to 112 points and a 2nd round playoff berth. The Sabres have the youngest team in the sport. And maybe by next year they'll be 2nd or 3rd from the bottom. We'll see. Lindy, though, has evolved. And that's always been my favorite part of Lindy as a head coach. He evolves. He adapts. And it does appear that what he did with the Devils, how Jack Hughes has talked about him in the past. Hughes raves about Lindy at times. You just seem to have a guy that knows that he had to change his coaching style, and he's done it. But he's also still going to hold guys accountable. That's a big reason why they're bringing him in here. That's what Adams talked about last week. So I think he's giving you a good balance there. And this is a point I'll always make about Lindy whenever I talk about the merit of him being your head coach. He will coach to your strengths. He will figure out what the team is good at, and that's the style he'll play. And 99 and post-Briere Drury, he had a period where Dominic Hasek was his best player. He had a period of time where Ryan Miller was his best player. 2 separate eras. Both of those eras, they built around the goalie. Defensive, lock it down. And the Hasek teams had, of course, a lot more success. They went to the finals, but the Miller teams ended up going to the playoffs too, won a division. Then you had in the middle of that, 05, 06, 06, 07. Lindy had the fastest, most skilled team in the sport out of the lockout. So what did he do? He opened the floodgates. Let's play fast. Let's play loose. Let's score goals. And let's be the highest scoring team in the league. And that's exactly what they did. I have confidence that Lindy will spend the summer dissecting what he's got. By the way, I should mention New Jersey for that too. New Jersey, he was the head coach. You want to take credit away from him? Fine, but I'm not. He was the head coach of one of the highest scoring teams in the league last season. Yes, it was young. On top of that, they scored. We know that the Sabres were 3rd in the league in goal scoring last year. The Devils were 4th. 1 year ago, this dude coached the 4th highest scoring team in the National Hockey League. He will figure out your strength and he will coach to that. And I think he will dissect the Sabres roster. He will figure out the right approach, the right way to go about things going forward. And then they will employ the right style. There will be no more confusion. We spent this last year, figuring out what do the Sabres want to be. Granato, by his nature, wants to be more loose and skilled and outscore your mistakes. Adams talked a lot about buttoning it up, and that's how they played at the beginning of the year. We were confused. Even to this day, we're still confused, I think, about what did they really want to be last year. I don't believe we'll ever have that problem with Lindy Ruff. I think you will always know exactly what they want to be under Lindy Ruff. When we come back, the PR element here. Is it actually good PR to bring in Lindy, or could you even argue that it's bad? That the Sabres are going to have to overcome bad PR by making this move? We'll get into that exchange when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. Saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. Talk to a team of award-winning agents. They'll walk you through the process step by step, easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Your work-life policy insurance may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come through with you if you were ever to leave your job. Policygenius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. This episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time, now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. Perfect time of year for that. As the Sabres season wrapped up, you don't have Bills for a while. Take a quick drive at the QEW. Go check out a Blue Jays game. Use the app that features customize your spot and supplemental as inspiration. What app feature pleasantly surprise you? I love looking at the views from your seat. You scroll through, you look at the different sections, the different views, but you get an exact angle of what you're going to be looking at, unlike any other app service before you buy. Panoramic view from your seat, not just, the one angle. Or Game Time, check out their lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, Lindy Ruff. He is the Buffalo Sabres head coach. I can't wait to hear him talk. I don't know when we're going to hear that. Probably this week, I would anticipate. Maybe tomorrow even. So Adams, I'm sure, will speak with him. You get probably a real introductory press conference down in the lobby, right? Not even the presser room, like the lobby of the arena. So we'll see what we get. I am feeling lucky enough to be someone that's going to get to interview him on a weekly basis on WGR. I have had one conversation with Lindy Ruff in my life, and it's a funny story. I was 11 years old, and I met Lindy in the Jim Kelly Club at Bills Vikings in 2007. And one of my proudest moments as a hockey fan growing up is I somehow, some way, had the self-confidence to go shake Lindy Ruff's hand. My dad made me go over. I don't think I could have walked over to him on my own. But I did have the confidence once I shook his hand to say to his face that he was not playing next if it got off enough. Did he take my advice? I don't know. He did score in Game 5 against the Rangers. Not saying to thank me or not. I don't even remember if that lines up time-wise. It might have been the year before. But actually, no, it would have been 07. But that's the only time I've ever talked to Lindy, and I'm looking forward to doing it this season. So what about the PR element here, though? I think that we're going to have a lot of talk about why the Sabres did this, and did they do it to help sell tickets, to help re-engage the fan base? Kevyn Adams made a statement in the last couple of hours that basically said, We did not do this for nostalgia. That is a bonus. The exact quote from Kevyn Adams. I want to be clear, though, that this hire was not made with nostalgia in mind. Lindy is the right person for the job now, and any history with our organization and community is simply an added bonus. And I appreciate that. I don't know how much I want to believe that. I think I do, though. I think it's tough, right? It's also possible Terry Pegula just told Kevyn Adams, I want Lindy Ruff to be my head coach. It's also possible. I don't know if it's likely. We could debate that all we want. They could have got to this for two different angles. Terry could have told Kevyn Adams, go hire Lindy Ruff. Sure. Adams also worked under Lindy Ruff as his assistant coach. Guys hire who they know. And Adams knows Lindy. He knows probably better than anybody of these coaches that are out there. He knows what Lindy is about. He worked for him. So he knows exactly what he's going to ask of his players, exactly the style he's going to play or try to play. So, you could debate that. But the nostalgia part of it, I don't just want to assume that the Sabres would have done this because of the good feelings. I think actually they would maybe have to debate, is this worth doing because of how it's going to make us look? Sure, it's going to make a large segment of the fan base very happy. How are you going to be perceived if you do this? That conversation was probably had before they hired Lindy Ruff. How will we be perceived? Because the answer to that is probably not very good. I've seen what people are saying around the league. I've seen what a lot of national media is saying, different podcast hosts that I listen to. Everyone's not quite laughing at the Sabres for this, but it's a big chunk of, they're just out of ideas, aren't they? They're just going back to Lindy, huh? Like they just not a real team. That type of sentiment, like kind of embarrassing, maybe on some level, that some people look at it that way. So for me, Larry Quinn is good to mention this. Former managing partner of the Sabres, the man who hired Lindy 30 years ago. I heard him call in to Chopin the Bulldog this afternoon. And also he talked with Tim Graham as well. Larry Quinn said with Chopin Bulldog, if you want to hire the guy for PR, if you want to hire someone for PR, and he's someone who used to make these decisions, what he said was, Lindy's not who you hire, because a lot of fans are going to think you're being toyed with a little bit. You're being played. Nationally, you're not going to be looked at very highly because of this. You're not getting a lot of good PR for this. You get some fans are going to love it. But he said, if you wanted good PR, you go hire Craig Berube. That's what you do. You go hire the most credibility possible, the Stanley Cup winning head coach, the guy that other teams are competing against you to get. That's who you go hire if you want good PR. And that's not what they did. So I would just assume Sabres did this because they're going to be, it's good, like, look at us, puff our chest out. We hired Lindy Ruff. If anything, I think they kind of have to overcome some stuff in terms of perception to hire Lindy Ruff. So I'm someone that's going to want to push that type of mindset aside a little bit, at least until we hear from Adams again and Ruff, and see kind of how this thing went down a little bit deeper. But I'm not someone that's really thinking that it's going to improve their reputation all that much. I think it will help re-engage the fans. I do think it's going to make fans feel good. Again, even the ones that might not like that they hired him, I think by the time opening night shows up, everyone's going to be on board and really wanting this to work, really wanting Lindy to be the guy that gets the job done. He's 64 years old. Listen, guys have coached that are older in the NHL. So this is not going to be a long-term situation. I know that. But, you probably got, if everything goes well, you probably got 4 years, maybe 5. How many guys coach to their 70? Not many, right? Boudreau, I've mentioned in the past couple of weeks, as someone I just never believed the Sabres was in the game for the Sabres because he's 69 years old. It's just not going to happen. Ken Hitchcock's an example. He coached until he was 67, Ken Hitchcock. So he didn't get to 70. Let me check Scotty Bowman. Bowman might be someone that coached into his 70s. Bowman went to 68. right? And he won a Stanley Cup and retired with the Red Wings in 2002. So if I'm looking at all-time coaches, I'll see if I can find one for you. I don't see anyone that's coached into their 70s. At least not many. I'll just check a couple more times here for you. Like Joel Quenneville, no. Barry Trotz recently retired. Barry Trotz retired at 59. I didn't even realize he was that young. He seems a lot older than that. Al Arbor. What about Al Arbor? Al Arbor, though, doesn't even count. He retired he's 61, and then he coached one game at 75. That's a weird one. Yeah, man, I'm not finding a lot of good ones here. Dick Irvin. I mean, that's so long ago. He only coached till 63. That doesn't count. Last one I'll look at. Pat Quinn. When did Pat Quinn coach still? Pat Quinn, though, of course, passed away in 2014. 67. Okay. All right, let me reset here. After looking at some of the top coaches of all time and how long they coached, it looks like everyone's done at about 67, 68 years old. So, all right, let's assume everything goes well for Lindy Ruff. Probably 3-4 years. 3-4 years max. But listen, what we all are going to daydream about when we all go to bed tonight, you're going to have a dream, and it's going to be about the Buffalo Sabres. And it's going to be Lindy Ruff hoisting the Stanley Cup with everybody in the Sabres arena bawling their eyes out. That's the guy everyone wants to lift the cup. That's the guy that wants to lift the cup here more than anybody. And it is literally a Disney level story. Listen, Gilbert Perreault, his nickname is Mr. Sabre, right? Mr. Sabre is Gilbert Perreault. I am going to make a formal declaration here on the show to wrap things up today that Gilbert Perreault, great all-time Sabre. Mr. Sabre is Lindy Ruff. From 79 to now the year 2024, he's still here. He still wants to do it here. He lives here. He wants to lift that cup here. It will be a Disney-level story if it ever happens. And he, I think, has earned the right already, and certainly would be if that happens. He is Mr. Sabre, Lindy Ruff. That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We enter the Lindy Ruff era, part 2.0, the sequel, over the next couple of months and into next season. So we'll talk plenty about what this means for certain players on the roster. I've seen a lot of conjecture already about what this means for Jeff Skinner's future. I got some very interesting opinions on that. So we'll get to that, and we'll talk playoffs, lots of stuff coming up juicy in the next couple of shows. The Amerks are heading to the playoffs. They're going to play the Syracuse Crunch. We'll be focusing on them as they enter the Calder Cup playoffs as well in the cup. Thanks, everybody, for listening today to the Locked On Sabres podcast. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, talking NFL draft, baseball, of course, the playoffs of the NHL and the NBA as well. We'll talk to you next time, talking Lindy Ruff 2.0 here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.